The real estate industry doesn't hand out easy moments. It hands out pressure. And how you show up in that pressure is what defines your brand.
Building trust with a brand is just like building trust with a person. But at the end of the day, how do we build trust as people? You show up when you say you're going to show up. You do the things that you said you're going to do. Force yourself to kind of think again.
The real estate industry doesn't hand out easy moments. It hands out pressure. And how you show up in that pressure is what defines your brand. My guest today knows that better than most. Bennett Richardson is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at the National Association of Realtors. He came in from the outside, Google, Politico, Semaphore, and stepped straight into one of the most scrutinized organizations in the industry. Less than a year in, he was promoted to CMO. Today, we're talking about how he thinks, how he leads, and what it actually takes to market to an organization where the audience is over 1 million realtor members, the American consumer, and Capitol Hill, all at once. This is X Factor Marketing. I'm Wendy Forsythe. Let's get into it. Bennett, welcome to the show. I've so been looking forward to this conversation. And let's just call it what it is. You do not have an easy job.
No, thanks so much for having me, Wendy. And it is, honestly, it's such a pleasure, one, to be here. I've looked up to you and the work that you're doing at EXP and on your own platform since I got started in the industry. So thank you so much for having me. I've been a listener for a while, so excited to jump on. And no, you're right, but it's been such a pleasure and such a privilege to be able to work with our community of realtors for the course of the past 9 months. One of the things that really attracted me to joining NAR in the first place was, realtors. So, I have dozens of friends who are in the real estate industry and who are realtors themselves. Really close with our realtor, Daniel Hyder here in Washington, who's worked with my wife and I on a few different transactions. I have a number of relatives who are realtors. Heidi Maynard and Corey Tracy, my cousin and aunt who run Pack Maynard Realty in Southern Maine and Kennebunkport, Maine. And it's a group of people that's really easy to show up for, right? These are extremely hardworking pillars of their community who are just showing up for their clients every day, bending backwards to make things happen, working so hard. As Kevin Sears, our past NAR president, likes to say, realtors show up every day unemployed, right? You have to re-earn that business and re-earn that kind of productivity and prosperity with that next transaction. And so, as a former entrepreneur myself, and having worked as a storyteller in lots of different capacities, one, just a community that's really easy to get excited about supporting, and two, such a interesting challenge and kind of puzzle as we seek to really build this next chapter for NAR. As you mentioned, we have a consumer brand with the realtor brand. We have obviously a lot of transformation to do in terms of repairing and rebuilding our own reputation and relationship and engagement with our members. And then also, one of the most formidable advocacy operations in the world here in Washington, D.C., being the biggest advocate and lobbyist for fair and affordable housing and trying to make sure that both realtors and consumers have the kind of financial model and policies and operating models that allow homeowners and sellers to be able to buy and sell their houses, but also allow realtors to be able to be successful. So on every one of those fronts, it was something that really just jumped off the page for me when I started talking with NAR last year. Nikia Wright's an amazing leader and such a fun and brilliant person to work with, as are the rest of our C-suite. So yeah, really excited to be here. And it's just such a pleasure to work with realtors in the real estate industry every day.
Oh, well, you brought up a lot of things that I want to touch on there. And let's dig into all the different stakeholders that you work for and serve at the National Association of Realtors. So the realtor members themselves, you mentioned, You mentioned, the Capitol Hill work, and certainly the advocacy work is so important, and we rely on you to do that, and then ultimately the communication and the messaging to the buyer and seller, and the representation of the realtor brand, which is so important. So, as the marketing leader and the communication leader, when you are making a decision, through what lens are you making that decision for? In what audience? How are you taking that into consideration?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think primarily it's really about putting our members first, right? I think that,
And that being the realtor member.
exactly, being the realtor member. And I think that for me and my focus is really on day to day is on primarily on two of those facets, right? Is really on our membership
Mhm.
and on consumers. We have an amazing advocacy team with Shannon McGann's our chief advocacy officer. Her team really obsesses over the policymaker, right? And they're the ones with the
Mhm.
relationships. They're the ones shaping the policy. Their team is on Capitol Hill in the White House every day, really building those relationships and telling that story of how realtors are affected by and think about different policy decisions and things like that. So for me, it's really about how do we engage and educate our members on all of these things. And so I think first and foremost, putting the member first means a lot of things. And it's also resulted, I think, in a lot of change and evolution that we've gone through over the course of the past year. One big piece of that is really, and this will not come as a surprise to any of the realtors and agents and folks that are listening, but it's like know your customer, right? Like really get to
Yes.
know who you're communicating with and what they care about. And so for us, that's meant we have a little under 1.5 million realtor members as of the end of last year, and communicating to that group. It needs to be diverse and reflect the multiple kinds of perspectives, priorities, um, areas of interest. All of these things. There's such a multitude of different parts of the country, places in their career, issues they care about. Right, as you can imagine, among that entire realtor membership around the country, some folks are really passionate about education and about leveling up their abilities in the industry. Some folks are early adopters, right, and they're the ones who are looking to NAR maybe not to provide them with the next technology solution, but what's the kind of guidance? What are the kinds of best practices in the industry? If I want to use AI, how do I do that in a way that's ethical, in a way that really safeguards, my client and my own business, all
Mhm.
sorts of different things. So square one for me was let's get to know our membership better. We're trying to do a whole lot more with data. We could do a whole entire another podcast about, audience segmentation and drip campaigns and all the sorts of stuff that we're trying to do. But it was really about getting to know that member and putting the member first, making sure that anything we're trying to communicate, the first and most important question that we're asking is, what do realtors need to know about this, right? It's not just that an exciting new policy was passed in Washington, but how is that going to put money back in your pocket? How is that going to create a more beneficial sort of buying environment or selling environment for your clients, and really translating that down to those bottom line impacts. And so that's really been the biggest focus of mine. And even when we think about our consumer voice, right? So we um, launched our new consumer ad campaign just about a month ago, and happy to talk more about that. But the goal there, of course, is consumer awareness and public awareness about what the realtor designation means, right? Like
Yes.
what does it mean to be a professional in this industry that's a member of NAR who has taken the code of ethics and is really committed to being kind of an upstanding professional in this industry. Creating that separation super important so that we're doing right by our members, right? Our membership, as a part of their dues to the National Association, fund a special assessment towards a consumer ad campaign, but it's their membership that's supporting that. And so I think even when we think about that consumer voice, the question is, what do realtors need today to help them thrive in their business? And that's how we really show up across all these different spaces, making sure that we're doing right by our members and everything that we do.
Yeah, so let's talk about that communication for a second. So I serve 83 plus thousand agents, and from one CMO to another, communicating with them is one of the biggest challenges that we have to solve for every single day. So I can't imagine, almost 1.5 million members and trying to solve for that communication gap or challenge. So what are some of the ways that you're thinking about trying to solve for getting the communication out there to your members on the services that are available, the products that are available, the education that is available? Because if they don't know about all the great things that you have available for them, then it doesn't matter, right? Because then they're not going to use them. They're not going to have an awareness of them. And I think that that is one of the biggest challenges and I know that is one of the things that I have, agents that will come up to me and say, Wendy, you know what EXP should do? They should do this. You know what you guys aren't doing enough of? You're not doing enough of that. And I'm sure in your travels you have similar experiences like that. So give me some advice on how you're solving for those communication gaps.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to take something you said and sort of flip it around the other way too, which is if we are telling them about everything we're doing, we're probably, right? We're probably sending them too much and sharing too much, and we're probably getting that mute button, that unfollow button, that unsubscribe button. And so
Yes.
it really comes down to personalization and diversification, I think. And for that is among that, 1.5 million, ish realtor membership. It's really about us understanding how can we meet our members where they are and understanding where they are in terms of their interests, in terms of their levels of engagement, in terms of their seniority in their industry. Are you a broker? Are you an office manager? Are you a broker owner? All of these different layers. So I think that segmentation has been crucially important. We're actually launching a new kind of broker newsletter today, specifically because we want to make sure that the unique challenges of brokers and kind of leading and shaping their teams and their offices, how can we address that in a way that's intentional and different from the way that we really want to communicate with agents. So that's just like one quick recent example. The other is really about diversification of kind of format too. As you can imagine, we are really invested in our social media channels, but even in those channels, trying to evolve the way that we communicate. Something that we've been doing recently, as an example, is just making sure that we're getting real people on camera. Realtors are natural communicators and connectors, and so we want to meet them in that kind of real authenticity. And so what I've been trying to do is get all the great experts that we have, from our economists to our research leads to our folks in advocacy and legal and everywhere across the industry, saying, hey, rather than us just making a little infographic about the work that we did, come hop on camera and let's walk down the hallway and get you up on a little reel that tells everybody about what's happening in the markets or the new research that we publish. So diversity.
And I would say kudos to you for doing that, because we noticed that, and it's a great way to humanize the brand and the leadership. And that is so important because it is about people, and NAR is about people too. And we are really seeing that shift. So I just want you to know that we are noticing that as sort of the audience that you are speaking to. And we appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and related to that, and it's also making sure that folks are not just hearing from NAR staff and NAR, volunteer leadership either. And so one of the things that we've been doing is really investing in our membership voices. So we launched the NAR Influencer Program at the beginning of this year, which is really our goal to share the microphone and make sure if there are realtors around the country who want to talk about their experience as being a realtor, want to talk about what is the market like in their area, what are the challenges that they're seeing, the opportunities that they're seeing, that we can help them get opportunities to really give them a voice. And so we've built a network of about 1,200 realtors around the country. It's growing kind of every day and every week for your listeners and the EXP folks in the audience. It's nar.realtor/influencers. You can sign up. And basically all that does make sure that you get a newsletter of all of the latest updates that are happening from around the industry, around the market, across NAR. And it gives us a little bit of a Rolodex to be able to say, hey, we're talking to someone in Portland, Oregon. We're talking to someone in Las Vegas, in the media, and they want to get a quick quote or hop on a Zoom or get a Facebook video with a realtor in that area. We now have people that they can connect with who are really smart and really informed in their area. So totally agree with you on the humanizing piece. It's so important, especially for what can be seen as sort of an old stodgy association like NAR.
Yes.
Even more important is getting those actual realtors in their communities and sharing the microphone with them and giving them a voice, because that's where obviously the kind of rubber meets the road, and where realtors around the country make such a big impact in their communities.
That's great. So what was that URL again?
Yeah, it's nar.realtor/influencers, and we'll send that over to you so we can put it in the show notes and things too.
In the show notes. All right. So nar.realtor/influencers if you want to be part of the NAR Influencer Program.
Awesome.
Awesome. Okay, I love it. That's great. I didn't know about that program, so that is a great share. So thank you. So let's talk a little bit about trust, because I think any brand is built on trust. And I think Nikia has done a wonderful job on her tour throughout 2025, and kudos to her for, being out on tour and making so many stops. And trust was something that I know I heard her talk about from stages across the country, and just being very transparent in rebuilding trust in, the National Association, and the importance of trust in not only the National Association of Realtors and its leadership, but in the realtor brand. So, in your role, you're sort of the steward of bringing that messaging to life. Now, that's a really tough message to bring that to life. Talk a little bit about how you and your team have been thinking about that.
Sure. Well, I'll be honest. It makes our lives a whole lot easier having such a great leader and such a kind of matter of fact, commanding voice in Nikia.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she is she is all business. She is working so hard to help modernize and evolve this association, and so that's authentic, right? And I think you build
Yes.
trust through that authenticity. And so, first of all, I have to give all the credit, to her for being the kind of leader who just naturally builds that trust through that authenticity and kind of through that honesty and that commitment. But I think that especially as we've been really trying to transform the association, over the course of the past, few years since kind of the settlement and practice changes, that just really being as transparent, as open, and as authentic as possible is crucial. And I think that's where you build trust with people, right? And I have always thought throughout my career, like building trust with a brand is just like building trust with a person. And it's oftentimes it's easy to overthink it because you have access to so many tools and you have so many different voices, so many different sources of information in your head about how to communicate and how to build trust. But at the end of the day, like how do we build trust as people, right? Like you show up when you say you're going to show up. You do the things that you said you're going to do. You follow through, right? It's all of these just basics. And I think that we've been trying to show that NAR as an association, our leadership, both in staff and in volunteer leadership, are worthy of our members' trust because we're showing up, because we're doing what we said we're going to do. We talk about financial discipline at the association. We've been able to demonstrate how we've, cut costs and increased revenue and reduced headcount and doing all sorts of things that are just the building blocks of what does it mean to be a more financially disciplined, financially transparent organization, right? Same thing in every corner of the association where we've transformed our legal team. Thankfully, we've had a number of dismissals in various lawsuits around the country over the course of the past year. Obviously, you can never predict what the outcome of a legal situation is, but we want to be able to tell the story of, hey, this is how this new team is operating, and these are some of the results that we're seeing. And so really, every corner of the association, it's about building that trust through that, I think, kind of accountability-focused communications of saying, hey, we promised you that we were going to do this differently, or we promised you that we were going to deliver this in a new way. And now we're doing it. And here's how we're doing it. And here's what we're going to build upon with that in the future. And I think that that's how you start to build a track record of accountability that leads towards trust. And it's the same thing, I think, as again, as we experience as people, right? Like there are people that you inherently trust very quickly because they show up
Yes.
for you and they do what they say they're going to do, right? I mean, I've only been in this seat for 9 months. It's been amazing to see the very accountable and trustworthy colleagues that I have. Who I say, gosh, I might have only been working with this person for a couple months, but every time I ask them to do something, they're getting it done on time or early, super thorough, going above and beyond. Like that kind of interpersonal trust, I think for us as marketers and communicators, you have to think about your brand the same way. And like, how can you be
Mm-hmm.
accountable? How can you be transparent? As we said before, how can you be human, right? Not feel like you're talking to some, big shiny robot, but you're actually, communicating with a human voice and an organization that's made up of people who are really committed. And that's, I think, how day by day, brick by brick, we can start to show that accountability that hopefully rebuilds that trust that we want our members to have, that one, we're doing right by them as realtors, and two, that every penny of their dues dollars are going to the right place.
Right. How do you think you build trust at scale? Because the interpersonal side of trust, right? You mentioned about like your team, and your team shows up, and when somebody says they're going to do something, they do it. And I think when you're in a smaller group, you know, that is easy to experience. How do you branch that out at scale to the membership at large?
Yeah, I think it is about that kind of really intentional, authentic storytelling, right? It is
Hmm.
about doing a couple of things at once. I think it is promises made, promises kept, right? Really being able to
Right.
say, hey, in Q1 of this year, we're going to try and accomplish these three things. And then at the end of
Hmm.
Q1, being able to say, hey, not only did we accomplish those three things and accomplish them well in the way that you were expecting us to, but we also got started early on this, fourth project that was also really important to our members. So I think it is very similar that when you're trying to build that trust at scale, it's about creating that environment of accountability. And again, doing it in a really human way, right? Making sure that folks are hearing from those voices at the top and throughout NAR, both from staff and among our volunteer leadership and the realtors around the country who volunteer their time to be a part of committees, be a part of our leadership, that they're hearing directly from them. And so we invest really heavily in that, just in terms of our time. Nikia, myself, all of our volunteer leaders, our board president and chairman Kevin Brown, our president-elect Christine Hansen, our vice presidents, our kind of first vice president who will be president after that, right? There's this entire ecosystem of people who are on the road just about all year long,
Yes.
right? I was talking to Kevin
Yes.
Brown, our president, just a couple of days ago, and he said he had just come off of a 6-week stint where he hadn't been home once because he has been
Hmm.
going to state and local associations, brokerages, meeting with individual realtors, meeting with policymakers, just doing the work, and being able to just show up for our members that way is crucially
Hmm.
important. And so I think it's that building trust at scale. It's really about that accountability. It's about communicating that in a human, natural way. But I also think it's about not leaving anyone out or anyone behind, which I think is also really important because, as we talked about earlier, like the realtor membership contains multitudes. So making sure that we're addressing and proactively trying to be really kind of empathetic about how will all of the different kinds of realtors interpret or react to a particular policy, a particular update, a particular change. You don't want to build something that benefits small independent brokerages and agents, but might be less beneficial to somebody who's a part of a big brokerage. So those are the kinds of things
Right.
that we talk about all the time, both at the program and product level, like when we're actually building things, saying, hey, how do we build education opportunities, technology, tools and policies? How do we build that so it's useful for as many members as possible? So that then when we get to the point of communicating with our members about those things, we've already thought about, hey, how is this kind of agent or this kind of broker or an appraiser or a developer, all the various kinds of stakeholders that exist across the industry. Like, how is this going to affect them? And I think that's the biggest challenge, but also I think the biggest opportunity for NAR is we have so many different kinds of stakeholders around the industry. In addition to kind of the core, residential real estate agent that makes up the majority of our membership, that we have an opportunity to engage and support all of them. We just need to be thoughtful about it and making sure that you don't only communicate to your largest population, but you really understand what are all the multitudes of support and engagement and membership that you have, and so you can engage them and educate them and show up for them in different ways.
Yes, and I think there's a connection in sort of the leadership that, if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned, listen, really understand, develop the strategy based on the needs that your members need, and then be completely transparent about it, be held accountable to it, communicate back to it, and then pivot as you need to along the way, and rinse and repeat. And that seems to be the path that I would say the new NAR and its leadership team are on. So it's been exciting to watch that evolution happen. So thank you for sharing a little bit of that insight.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And your point about not being afraid to pivot is a really important one. One of my favorite, and I wouldn't even call it a business book. I think it's even more of like a philosophy mindset kind of book, is Think Again by Adam Grant. He's a great organizational and kind of sort of societal psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania. It's a book that I gave to all of my team leaders at the end of last year, and it's this fascinating look at big historical moments, winning wars or gold medals or Nobel Peace Prizes, and how, if there hadn't been a fundamental change and pivot and sort of refinement or sometimes complete overhaul in strategy or approach, that those amazing milestones in human history just would have never happened.
Right.
And my goal with that was not to say that we all should be like second guessing decisions till the very end, but should also feel really comfortable in saying, hey, this isn't working, but there is something really important here that we need to dig into. So I think that you made a really good point there, that not being afraid to pivot when you start to find some success, and even if it's not where you thought it was going to be, being able to run at that and sort of readdress that really quickly and force yourself to kind of think again about, hey, maybe this strategy was 50% right, but there's a new 50% that I can dig into. I think that's so important.
Yes, it sure is. And listen, we are realtors. We understand the pivot. We do that daily for sure. Let me ask you a closing question. I call the podcast X Factor, because I believe that we all have an X factor, and that is at the core of all of our success, that superpower that makes us unique. What do you think your personal X factor is?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, honestly, I think it's really just that, like, I love people. Like, I am really a very much like a natural extrovert, and so I think that one of the things that has allowed me to find joy in a career as a marketer and a communicator, and a storyteller, is really just connecting with people. And so I think that goes back to, right, humanizing communications, things like that. Like, really always remembering that there's a human being on the other side of that screen or that dashboard or that ad campaign or that social media post. When I was in a previous role, we talked about this idea of like measurable action bias, right? Like, you can sometimes really want to do more of something just because it gives you some more clicks, or just because you get to see those
Yes.
leads rolling in. But if you can balance that science with the sort of human art of saying, there are real people out there who are receiving this. How are they receiving it? How am I showing up for them? How can I connect with people both personally and at scale, right? That's what every realtor wants to be able to do, is to take that spark of their personality and their local expertise and their hard work, and allow that to translate to lots of different potential clients. Like I think that just remembering the people that make all of this work on every side of the industry, every side of the transaction, like I think that that's allowed me to have some success and really just always keeping it human and keeping it personal. And remember, whether it's managing a team, whether it's building a campaign, that we're all just people working really hard, trying to succeed. And I think the more that we can all keep it human and kind of keep it, friendly and everything else, the more successful it can be, and the more fun we're gonna have along the way.
Keeping it human and having fun. That's a great X factor. Well, Bennett, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks so much for having me on, Wendy. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.